It's the first birth story episode of 2023, and let me tell you, it is a great one. Welcome to the All About Pregnancy and Birth podcast. I'm Dr. Nicole Calloway Rankins, a board-certified OBGYN who's been in practice for nearly 15 years. I've had the privilege of helping over 1,000 babies into this world, and I'm here to help you be calm, confident, and empowered to have a beautiful pregnancy and birth. Quick note, this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not a substitute for medical advice. Check out the full disclaimer at drnicolerankins.com/disclaimer. Now let's get to it. Hello there. Welcome to another episode of the podcast. This is episode number 192. And whether you are new to the podcast or a loyal listener, I am so glad that you are spending some time with me today. In today's episode of the podcast, we have Tess. Tess is a runner, a work from home mom, and an entrepreneur. She produces and directs road races such as 5Ks, 10Ks, and half marathons, and she consults on all things road racing and running-based wellness. She resides in Atlanta, Georgia with her husband Malik and their daughter Isla Rose. And that's such a pretty name. Well, Tess's pregnancy journey included an ectopic pregnancy, a miscarriage, and an almost IVF cycle, which you will hear about, that was halted by COVID. And she is also what I call a more mature mom. Isla Rose was born to Tess at age 43. Now, Tess has a really positive outlook on things, from having an ectopic to having a, quote, geriatric pregnancy, to how the visits were, the doctor visits were during the pandemic. She's just finds a positive spin on everything. And I just love her energy. She's such a wonderful, joyful person to talk to. Really happy birth story. And I know that you are going to love it. And she also happens to be a member of my online childbirth education class, the birth preparation course. And she's going to talk about how that played a role in her having a great birth experience as well. Now, if you are listening to this on the day the episode drops, Tuesday, January 17th, there is still time to register for my class, my live class, Make a Birth Plan the Right Way. Making a birth plan is so much more than filling out a template or form that you find online. When you fill out those forms, it doesn't actually tell you whether or not the doctor or hospital actually support what is in that piece of paper. And in my class, Make a Birth Plan the Right Way, I teach a step-by-step process where you will know that you actually have the support for what's in your birth plan and get people to pay attention to it as well. You can sign up for the class, drnicolerankins.com/register. I'm only going to be doing this class live about 4 times a year. So if you're due in January, February, March, or April, now is the time to sign up, and I will see you in class. All right, let's get into the episode with Tess. Thank you so much, Tess, for agreeing to come onto the podcast. I am so excited to chat with you about your story. As I said before we got started, I know folks are going to find it relatable and useful. So thank you.
Oh, no problem. Looking forward to it.
Yeah. So why don't you start off by telling us a bit about yourself and your family?
Well, again, my name is Tess Sobomian Marshall. I live in Atlanta, Georgia with my husband, Malik, and our amazing, almost 20-month-old daughter, Isla. I've been here for about 12 years. You know, everyone in Atlanta is probably from somewhere else. So I'm originally from the Midwest and have been here for about 12 years. And my profession is I'm a race director. I put on and produce road races like 5Ks, 10Ks, run walks, work with some charitable organizations to help them put on their events. So it's a good life here in Atlanta.
Yeah, I love it. That's really, really cool. And I love that name, Isla. That's really pretty.
Thank you.
Yeah. So in order to understand what happened with your birth, we have to talk a bit about what your pregnancy was like, what your prenatal care was like. So what was your pregnancy and prenatal care like?
Well, the best way I describe it was very uncomplicated as far as the pregnancy, but the journey to get pregnant was definitely one that I think, you know, a lot of people can relate to or not.
Yeah, let's talk about that if you want to get into it. Yeah.
Yeah. The journey to get there, I would say is one that some women can relate to. I'm currently 45, but at the time when we kind of started, me and my husband both married kind of later in life. We're both, I was in my late 30s. He was in his early 40s. We took our, a couple of years to enjoy married life.
Sure.
We started thinking about kids, and, we did not prevent at any point really after we got married. But, at some point we kind of realized like, hey, it's nothing's like just naturally happening.
Right.
And then in 2000, I'm going to make sure I get my years right. 2018, I actually had an ectopic pregnancy.
Okay.
And it was literally like I had there was no signs, symptoms, and ended up having to go to the emergency room and literally found out in a matter of moments that I was pregnant. And then it was, I had lost the baby as an ectopic pregnancy. And really my first time even knowing what that was. So that was really just kind of a...
that sounds like it was just, you got hit with a lot all at once.
It was crazy. I was coaching a middle school cross country team at the time, and I literally came to practice one day and just something didn't feel right. I went into the bathroom, and those of you who have experienced ectopic pregnancies, you probably know what happened in that bathroom. And I ended up having to call the school nurse, and I'm still super grateful to that school nurse because she came. This was after school, so there were kids everywhere.
Right.
I'm in this random campus restroom, and the school nurse came and she helped kind of get me to can't remember. I think my husband came to pick me up, and we got to the hospital and again, kind of learned all that information all at once. It was definitely, a trying time. I was about a week out from one of my biggest events.
Oh,
so,
my gosh.
Having to deal with that as well as trying to, continue to be a leader as a business owner. That was challenging, but, had a great family and friend support along the way. Did
you have surgery?
Yes, I did have to have a minor surgery. They like to call it procedure. They didn't want me to call it surgery.
Mm-hmm.
I did have to eventually go back. I think it was about a month later to do the DNC to make sure that everything was cleared. So all that, and the kind of takeaway that me and my husband chose to take from that was, hey, we can get pregnant. That was something, the positive that we took away from that.
Right.
Obviously those months afterwards, were very, sensitive in terms of just, being more aware. 'Cause like I said, I had no idea. There were no symptoms that told me I was pregnant. So for probably the next year, all of 2019 and early 2020, we weren't preventing. And it was kind of that thing where...
I was going to ask, do you mind me asking first, do you feel like, how were you treated during the course of the ectopic is one thing.
Yeah.
And then I'm curious, did your doctor at any point in this time talk to you about your fertility? So maybe first let's start with how you felt you were treated during the process. Yeah.
So, my husband actually works for one of the healthcare systems here in Atlanta. He's not a medical person, but he works for, I don't know if you want me to say what hospital it is, but, and so we went to that particular hospital, and it was just because it was top of mind to me.
Right.
And I was happy with it. Again, all the information was new to me.
Sure.
So whatever they told me was just going to be what I learned because I didn't know anything. I didn't even know what an ectopic. I literally had to Google it to find out.
Right.
And it's actually ironic. The doctor that helped me, two doctors that helped me during that time, I ended up seeing them regularly during my pregnancy.
Okay.
So, again, I had, positive experience as far as just being informed and being told. And one of my volunteers that helps me with one of my raises is a medical doctor. And she came up there and she was making sure I was asking all the right questions.
Oh, good.
And they absolutely did, tell me all the different things that were possibilities in terms of my fertility. But like I said, all of 2019, we pretty much just, didn't do anything to prevent.
Right.
And I think it was the end of 2019, I was finally like, you know what, we need to see what's really going on. Because again, we're both, in our 40s and, I'm fairly healthy, but at the same time, So we went and saw a fertility specialist at the end of 2019, got all the consultations. I think it was early 2020. I got the what was that procedure where they shoot the gel into your
maybe an HSG,
that
hysterosalpingogram.
there, boy, let me tell you.
Not fun.
Yeah. So I was like, okay, now I know what that feels like.
Right.
So I got that test, and from that test, it was determined that my tubes were. I think they said my cilia was kind of like weak and slow, and it was going to be difficult, if not, it would be very difficult for me to get pregnant.
Right.
So we started looking at IVF, and we did all the research. We actually had the full consultation. I think this was late February. We had the whole consultation. We started looking at insurance, all that good stuff. And
everything.
We were scheduled on March 21st to go in for the first round.
Right.
We all know what happened, March of 2020. And so, I mean, it was crazy because all the clinics shut down, and we were like, okay, I guess this can be put on hold. And then Dr. Nicole, even more crazy was I actually got pregnant at the end of March and miscarried like within the first 2 weeks of April. And so this was all during the hardcore shutdown time of the pandemic.
Yes.
So I went through all that, and that one was really tough. Because again, I didn't realize that I was actually pregnant until I just started bleeding, and it was this like couple of days of like excitement, and then I have a really good friend who's a midwife, and I was like texting her and calling her, and she just assured me make sure I go in, and I went in to see at the same hospital. I went in to see a doctor. I actually ended up seeing a midwife there, and I'll never forget this woman. She was a Jamaican woman, and she told me, she's like, listen, I want you to just stay positive. You will have children if that is your heart's desire. And she said, you just get through this, take care of yourself. And what she said was, you'll have 50 babies if you want 50. Like, I don't want 50 babies.
I don't know about that, but okay.
And I just always remember those kind, positive words.
Right.
So we went through the pandemic. So, summer, fall, spring, summer 2020. And again, just, wasn't doing anything to prevent. And we were like, okay, in November, we'll pick back up with the whole IVF discussion. I want to get past my busy fall.
Right.
My birthday is in August. So at the end of August, I had this big old birthday party. I'm also a brewery and beer connoisseur. I had this big party where I had everybody come over and bring beers, and we all drank beers and had a good old time. And the month of September was just a big lead up to my my big event that I host in October. And right after that event in October, I just wasn't paying attention to anything. And at the end of the middle of October, I was like, you know what? I have not had a period this month. Like, what's going on?
Right.
So went, and at this point, you're not getting excited, right? You've been through so many things.
Sure.
And I went to the local drugstore, got a couple of pregnancy tests. Took the first one. I mean, it was immediate. Yeah. And then I did the little half smile.
Right.
Okay. So I waited a day, and I took another one. And I didn't tell my husband because I just, yeah.
Right.
So I went, and the second one quickly came back positive. So at that point, I messaged my friend. I told you that was a midwife, and I told her, and I was like, listen, I don't want to get my hopes up. She's like, well, schedule an appointment, go get an official test at the doctor. I did that, and I think it was maybe like 3 days later that I got the official test at the doctor, and I came back, and she told me that I think at that point I was like 8 weeks.
Okay.
And I remember sitting in that little waiting room, and like just sitting there praying, like, listen, Lord, if you make this, I remember specifically saying, if you make this one, this is a viable pregnancy, I'll eat salads every single day for the whole pregnancy. That was my promise.
Like, I'm bargaining. I'm just
eating salads every day.
Yes.
So that's how I found out, and of course, that was positive news.
Sure. Did you have an ultrasound that day, or was it later?
So I think they gave me the ultrasound, and I was able to see the little, little blip.
Probably so, since you have a history of ectopic. We tend to try to get folks to have an ultrasound early. So, okay. Yeah.
So I think it was a nurse practitioner that I met with when I went there. So again, at the same hospital that I dealt with the ectopic pregnancy. And so to finally get to your original question, I started my care there, and it's a hospital system. So, it was different doctors every time I went in, every once in a while, a midwife. But I was able to schedule and see the doctors that kind of the 4 or 5 doctors that I was really comfortable with. There was one that I saw probably more than the others. We'll get to this, but, I was able to, I did know all the doctors that were on call during my actual delivery. I was familiar with, so that was positive.
Got it.
And you have the ability to see any of the doctors throughout your time, as far as their schedule goes. So
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So at what point did you feel like, or did you ever feel a sense of like relief, like this pregnancy is actually gonna happen?
Yeah, well, I think all women who've gone through miscarriage can relate that you're never 100% comfortable.
Sure.
Yeah, but I think that moment, and when the nurse practitioner came in and she said that I was indeed pregnant, because the early March miscarriage was her confirming that it was miscarriage.
Got it.
So
Got it.
I think that was like one step, and then again, this was during the kind of peak of like the COVID shutdowns and all that. My husband wasn't able to come with me to the hospital for any of the appointments.
Oh, that's right.
But we actually did one of those. Isn't it funny how we forget that was the case back in the day?
Yeah.
We went to one of those kind of ultrasound boutiques in town, and he got a chance to see the baby on the ultrasound. So that was a huge step in our just kind of like getting really excited.
Connecting and
And then of course, as a geriatric, what they consider geriatric pregnancy.
It's rude. It's rude.
I'm okay with it. You know what? I say this all the time. Like, I actually enjoyed this special attention.
Oh, look at that. See, I like how you put a positive spin on it.
Yeah, and I was there every week. I had my little parking spot downtown that I would always go to, so I enjoyed it. But we also obviously had to get the blood test. I think it was mandatory, or at least strongly recommended. And so we did find out the gender early. So all those like phases and steps and hitting the different like natural milestones,
right,
that gave us more and more excitement and confidence that this is where we were heading.
Good. So you felt like you were happy with the care you received even during the course of the pandemic? I know that sucked that your husband couldn't come.
Yeah. But well, I really enjoyed the time. I felt like that was like a bonding time with me and my daughter. Like, even our little trip, our drive to the hospital. Yeah. Like, so when I would park, there'd be nobody downtown. Right, it was a special time, and we didn't know any different. I didn't know any different.
Sure.
I mean, I just know, like, when I go to my normal appointments, my husband wasn't with me, so it just felt like normal appointment.
That makes sense. And it also it's something that I think we don't appreciate. That's the closest you're ever going to be to your child, having them inside of you and that connection. So I love that spin that you put on that.
And it was actually kind of cool because, we'd be in the waiting room and she saw the pregnant mothers in the waiting room. You weren't even allowed to have anyone in the waiting room waiting for you. And I remember this one time a woman had her husband come and the lady stopped him at the door. She's like, no, you got to stay out there. So it's like we had our own little club.
Right.
And he was always in and out. I don't remember ever waiting longer than like 5 minutes to see my doctor. So those are some of the positives of the time.
Yeah. So what did you do to get ready for your birth?
Oh, goodness. So I'm a person that really likes a lot. I just like to have like a lot of different, a lot of information from different sources, not necessarily to take on how I'm going to feel, but just to be well aware. So I was huge on just like YouTube. I found a bunch of people that I really like to follow that were informative, vloggers, and then of course podcasts. And I actually found your podcast. I think the first episode was a birth story.
Okay.
And usually if I find a podcast episode that I like, then I'll just click on the podcast and see if, they have other topics. And boy, let me tell you, I just didn't even know, like some of the topics that you covered. And this was back when I don't think you had hit 100 episodes yet.
Okay.
We were still under 100. So you can literally access everything on the Apple Podcast app. And I would go to sleep, listen to podcasts, wake up, listen. My husband was like, you're going to turn into a podcast. Like, so I listened to your podcast. I listened to the Birth Hour podcast.
Yep.
I love listening to birth stories. Definitely love listening to like whatever stage I was in.
Sure.
I wanted to hear, more accounts of that. And then even towards the end, my friend told me, she's like, don't watch live births on YouTube. And of course, oh, why not? Started watching those live births on YouTube. So yeah, I was very well informed. And the doctors will always ask when we came in, are you more of a listener, a watcher, or reader?
Huh.
And I realized quick, I love to listen and watch. Like I'll read a book, but I really enjoyed kind of like listening. And like I said, I felt like I knew you, like we were talking. And then my husband and I did go through your birth and pregnancy course.
Yes.
And extremely helpful. It was awesome for us to do it together. And just learn. I just felt so like prepared for any scenario that possibly could have happened from all that information that was.
Right. Awesome. Love it. Love it. Love it. So then what are some things that you wanted for your birth?
It's funny because listening to a lot of women talk about their wants and desires, I'm not the type of person that needed like a doctor that was going to be, it didn't bother me that we had multiple doctors. Sure. And as long as the person was, professional and had, good, bedside manner, so to speak, I was fine with that. But, I definitely wanted to be informed of everything that was going to happen. Definitely didn't want to have any of those experiences where I felt like something was done to me or I was forced down a road because of, my age or my... I remember taking my questions in, to my appointments the last few weeks, and the doctors were all really great about answering the questions and making me aware. So one of the things that was recommended to me, and I never felt like I had to do it, but I took their, since I was advanced maternal age. Sorry, that's what I meant to say earlier. Geriatric, but the advanced maternal age. So they said that if I didn't go into labor naturally, they would recommend I schedule my induction in the 39th week. Yeah. And I was fine with that, and my daughter started weighing lower on the scale towards the end, like the week 36, 37. So they really recommended, like, we want to make sure there's no issues with the placenta. Sure. So I was due May 24th, but I scheduled the induction on May 17th. Okay. And then, so that was like the very beginning of week 39. Got it. So that was something that, if I didn't feel like I needed to push back or anything, because I felt like they made me aware of like why they recommended that. Absolutely. And I feel like if I would have said no, I'd rather just kind of wait it out. They would have, given me that option. Sure. And not push back on it, so.
Yeah. So the key was that it was something that you felt like you were able to come to yourself with good information and understanding and why.
Yes. And, I have nothing against the epidural. I said to myself, I just wanted it to be available. I didn't have any, I wasn't trying to win any medals for pain tolerance or anything. So, when we get into the actual birth story, it was an experience. I feel like I got the best of both worlds during my...
Gotcha. Well, let's get into it. Then what happened with your labor and your birth?
Yeah. So like I mentioned, I had my induction scheduled, literally up to the day. There was no Braxton Hicks, no feeling like, no water break, all the things, and again, I was watching different like YouTube videos of women, trying to, tough it out at home for a little while. So I was like, oh, guess I won't get that experience. So the day before was a Sunday, and I had some of my friends come over and we were just hanging out. And then Monday morning we were scheduled to go in, I think at like 4 or 5 o'clock. So it was so crazy because me and my husband we have a 2-level house. He was upstairs, I was downstairs, and we were just both just getting our minds right. We weren't talking, we were just quiet in the house. It was almost like we both kind of knew like
it's about to happen.
Something new is about to happen in our world. And then right around the time it was time to leave, like I went upstairs, we had our bags packed and got in the car, and we were just like looking at each other. It was almost like, first date, like, oh my God. Since I was in good shape, we basically just went, parked, got to the reception area. And one of the funniest things I thought from our reception, I carried small pretty much the whole pregnancy. And to the point where it was like, I was glad those last 2 weeks when I stopped kind of going out, because every time I would tell someone how far along I was, they'd look at me like, really? Like, you look like you 2 months pregnant.
Right.
And, it didn't help that, I wore baggier clothes, or I started wearing my husband's clothes towards the end because they were more comfortable. So when we walked up to the reception,
just side note, I wish people don't comment on people's pregnant body. Like nobody wants to hear it. Like it doesn't.
Yeah, and again, I didn't think anyone said it out of,
I know, and people don't. They don't mean anything by it. But I had the opposite, where people would say, "You look huge." Like,
yeah, that's what I normally say.
Yeah.
Like. Normally saying, and just the way people would say, they didn't mean it, but I just was so happy the last couple of weeks when I was at home. Yeah. And I didn't have to hear it every single day.
Yes.
And then, so we walk up to the reception area, and the woman actually asked, "Who's the patient?" So apparently that's how small I must have been carrying. And I looked at my husband, I looked at her, and I said, "I don't know, but something inside of me needs to come out."
Yeah, like it's me. Like
and she just started laughing. So I guess I must have looked like real spunky.
Right.
And I don't remember. No, I do remember. I had kind of a baggier sweatshirt on.
But still, okay. Are you tall? Because sometimes when people are tall,
I guess. I'm 5'8". So.
Okay, maybe so. Yeah. Okay.
So once we cleared up who the patient was. I think we waited in the lobby area for about 5 minutes, and it was funny because there was another woman there, and she was there by herself with a bag. It was like this must have been like her third or fourth time. She was just ready. She had like one little bag. Right. We're coming in first time parents with suitcases and all the things. And so one thing that I wanted to mention, that I don't think I had ever heard anyone talk about this, and that was surprising to me. Yeah. They actually took me back to the room first. And it was about 20 minutes before they brought my husband back. And I remember they were asking me a lot of questions about, was I comfortable with the person that I was, that was there for my care, and and I almost like a screening, like a domestic violence. That's exactly
what it is. Yeah.
Yeah. And I actually appreciated that. I just didn't know that was something that they do. And like I said, I had never heard anyone talk about that. So, fortunately that wasn't my situation, but I remember thinking to myself, man, that's awesome that they do that, because, that's like your one chance if you are in a tough situation to maybe put up a red flag and get some help. So
and sadly, unfortunately, we do have to do that, because we do sometimes have folks screen positive for being in difficult situations. So I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yeah. So, my husband actually, ended up coming back, and this was, May of 2021. So we were required to wear our mask when we were in like lobby areas. But once we got into the room, I wasn't required to wear a mask as the birthing person, but he was required to keep his mask on. And of course, all the doctors, nurses, everyone who came in and out of our room were masked. But I was very grateful for it, because there was a lot of back and forth in different hospitals in the Atlanta area about like some hospitals required you to literally be in labor with a mask on. I was like,
it's just nearly impossible. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we would have had some words there, but it was never required. And actually, May of 2021 was right around the time when they started kind of lifting some of the restrictions. But we stuck to our plan. All the family was, via text, and stuck to our plan. My husband was my one support person. I chose not to get a doula just because I felt like my husband would do a great job of, advocating for me, supplying all my needs that I needed. And he indeed was perfect. Awesome. Look, I never felt the need to have anyone else intercede for me. So
good.
So we get settled into the room. I just remember having this feeling of like excitement, and also just after watching and hearing so many birth stories, like this is my story. Like I'm about to like live my actual story.
Right.
And so they started the induction process with the Foley bulb, and I can't remember which of the C medicines.
Cytotec, maybe?
It's Cytotec and something else, but I can't remember which one I got. But that was right around 8:20.
Okay.
That evening. And I will say like that Foley bulb pain was, that at that time I was thinking to myself, this is what they're talking about. This is pain. Like it was very painful. I remember having, whenever I had to go to the bathroom, my husband would, help me get unhooked from all the machines, go to the bathroom. I started off at, I think it was 1.5 centimeters and 50 50% effaced. So they explained to me, everything about the Foley bulb and the goal to get to 4 centimeters, and they would come in and test it every hour or so. So I can't remember exactly how long it was in, but I do remember it was in the middle of the night, because again, it started at 8:20 p.m. So middle of the night, they finally come in, and they would, I would actually fell asleep. I don't know how, because I was in so much pain.
Right.
And I remember they came in, they finally did the final tug, and it came out. And I just remember this sense of relief coming over. And once they pulled it out, I think there was a small lag time, and then they started the Pitocin. Mm-hmm. And again, they asked me, if I understood, what those. Oh, another thing too that they did, they asked me several times if I knew why I was being induced. Huh. So I thought that was interesting. And, after listening to you talk so many times, I thought that was something, obviously a protocol in place, almost to make sure that I was saying that was my idea more so than their idea. So
interesting. Okay.
So we started the Pitocin, and I think they started it at a level 2. And I just remember going through that, and that was about 4 a.m. So from about 4 a.m, I think I managed to fall asleep, get a nap in. They kept kind of upping it to every time they would come in and check. Yep. My centimeters kept kind of increasing slowly. I think I got stuck at maybe 5 or 6 for a longer period of time when they would come in. Over that course of time, several nurses coming and going, and these are all things I knew were going to happen. Right. I had some awesome nurses, and I had some nurses that you could tell they were just there to get their shift done. Yeah. There was one point where I think I had more switches, because they usually only switch every 12 hours. Usually. But there was one that had to switch in the middle of the shift, so I had more nurses than normal. Gotcha. But right around, I'd say about 1:30, they upped it to level 16. And I have this written down in my notebook, level 16. I was like, okay, here we go, level 16. And up to this point, I'm like, if this is what labor is, I'm good. I think I can do this. Right. After that Foley bulb experience, I was like, if that was the worst pain, it was awful, but I could deal with that. Right. So they upped it to 16, and somehow I managed to fall asleep. And I'll never forget, I woke up with a jolt of pain that I had never felt before, right around 2:00. And I said, oh my gosh. And I told my husband, and I was like, can you check the monitor? Did I just have a contraction? Because if that was a contraction, this is not what I thought it was going to be. And, I kept asking nurses on and off throughout the day, how will I know if it's, because they kept asking me, do you think you might want the epidural? Because we do have to order it. And, and I was like, oh gosh. So that jolt pain woke me up, and I was like, oh my God, I think this is what they've been talking about. Right. And I think I hit the nurse button, and I was like, okay, I'm not sure, but I think I just had the real contraction. What do I need to do if I do want that? Because I know they needed to do a IV, make sure I had a full IV, and it was going to be about an hour before they could come around, because there were so many people on my floor having babies. So I was like, okay, let's just get the IV just in case. And in that hour that it would take for me to order the epidural, it just got increasingly more and more. And that's why I tell you, I had the best of both worlds. I got to experience the whole unmedicated. I'm good. I can live to tell the tale. Right. But send the epidural team in as fast as you can. Because I'm ready. So I experienced about 2 hours of the volcano eruption. Okay. Yeah. Gotcha. It was something. Okay. But my pride is I didn't cuss anybody out. I didn't tell my husband that, why did you do this to me? I didn't do any of that. I did cuss, but I didn't cuss anybody. Right. And, again, it was, I feel like I got it. Good to know. I can tell other women, and Gotcha. So, and then when the epidural team came in, and here's my advice to women who are considering, just don't look forward. I don't even know what the people look like. Right. I never saw the needle. If there was, I just followed whatever instructions they told me. I did it. I remember them telling me, listen, if you have a contraction and you start moving around, we're going to have to stop until your contraction's done. And I remember having a contraction while they were doing it. I was like, I stood so still. I was like, I do not want to delay. So after they finished everything, they did an awesome job of like everything they did. They explained to me what they were about to do and how I would possibly feel. And so that was really, really helpful. So, for any women who are like petrified of the whole epidural experience, like don't look. Just make sure that they are giving you step by step before, even if they just are touching you on the shoulder, like I'm going to touch you on the shoulder. And hopefully you have, lucky enough to have doctors that will give you that level of alertness.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then once they were all done, they were like, well, it's going to take about 20 minutes for you to feel it. And I remember looking at the clock and saying, okay, that's about 5 more contractions. And just like they said, after, each one, it got a little bit less intense until finally it felt like it had kicked in. And, I think what would be called a good epidural, because I could still move my legs and feel my legs. But I didn't feel anything in my torso, vaginal area. So that was great.
Nice.
And I also remember them telling me that I would feel this like itching sensation for a while. And as long as I didn't scratch, it would go away quick. And I just remember I was like, whatever you guys tell me, that's what I'm going to do. So I just took it. And eventually, it did subside. So, so that was about 4 or 5 o'clock. So from that point, it was just monitoring.
And do you know how dilated you were when you got the epidural?
I think I was like I said, I was like stuck at like 6 for a long time. So right around 6. Okay. So I don't have the exact timestamps, but I know like every time they would come in, it would go up 1.
Sure.
1. And, we were just in the room watching TV. I remember we had BT and we were just watching like Martin and Fresh Prince episodes. We saw every single Martin and Fresh Prince episode ever made in that time. I remember, must have been, Tuesday night. So this is into Tuesday night. We actually saw the like This Is Us penultimate episode. So like I remember these things vividly in my mind. So after that went off, I was like, okay, I'm gonna go ahead and, go to sleep and see. And I had this little text thread going with a group of friends and also some family, and everyone was putting in their predictions about when the baby was going to be, when the baby would actually come. So of course, this is May 18th. And everyone was thinking, sometime tonight. So I had family members anywhere from like 10 o'clock all the way till midnight. So finally we get around the 10:30 hour. The doctor comes in, she checks, and I think I was at like a 9.
Okay.
So we were thinking, okay, we'll be close. She came back again, I can't remember, a little bit quicker, and did another check. And so, you know what? You're at a 10. We can start practice pushing. And I was like, practice? What practice like, pushing? What? Because I'm thinking we're going into the next day.
Right.
So somehow I managed to text my family. I was like, you guys better upgrade your guesses because this thing's going into the next day. So I had all his family members, guessing this, that. Somebody put the 21st. I was like, I'm not going to go into 2-day labor. Yeah. But I remember my aunt, one of my favorite aunts, had predicted 11:59 on the 18th. So I was like, okay, I want her to be right. So we're gonna push for this. So I started the practice pushing at about 11 o'clock, and during all this time, I had just awesome. I just remember having really awesome nurses and coaches on either side of me. My husband was on my right side. The nurse on duty at the time was on my left side. Right. Eventually, they brought in the pediatrician, and the hospital I gave birth is also a teaching hospital, so there were a lot of people in the room. Sure. And at one point, I look around the room and I realize I have literally, except for my husband, all Black female delivery team. Wow. The tech, the resident, everyone. The pediatrician, I believe, may have been East Asian, but we told her she was honorary for that moment. So I had Beyonce Homecoming playing in the delivery room. Yes. And so by the end of the practice pushing phase, I had everybody's favorite Beyonce song. I knew where everybody was from. One of the doctors was from Houston. Like we were having a good time in there.
Yes.
Meanwhile, every 2 or 3 minutes, I'm pushing through these contractions. So we get to 11:30 and she's like, okay, we're ready for real push.
Right.
So they did a bunch of stuff in the room. My husband actually had to excuse himself for a moment. And I didn't find this out until afterward because he said he somehow got kind of dizzy.
Oh, Lord.
Went into the bathroom and we all heard this like, brrr. We're like, oh, Lord. I was like, please don't tell me this man is passed out in the bathroom. But he emerges back out of the bathroom looking a little flushed. I was like, babe, I need you to be my rock here. So he comes back over, gets his spot back. And then, I guess it's kind of blurry, but, we're pushing. Just Beyonce's playing. Nurses are out everywhere. People are, and, I'm, of course, looking up. The light's bright. And I pushed for about 30 minutes and I just never forget that second to last push. I looked up at the clock and it was 11:58.
Right.
I was like, Auntie Debbie is going to be the winner. So this is coming.
Right.
And for some reason, the contraction took a little bit longer to come. And I started pushing at about 11:59 and like some seconds. And it was about 30 seconds of pushing. And Isla came at 12 o'clock midnight as the clock turned over.
Oh my goodness.
He was born on May 19th,
right.
2021. And it was just, it was crazy. Like after, seeing and hearing so many different birth stories, my birth story was in the books.
Yeah.
So when she came out, I think I'm a Diva was on. That's the song she came out to.
All right.
She came out screaming with a full head of hair. And I just knew that she was going to be bald headed because all the heartburn, all that. I didn't have any of that stuff all throughout my pregnancy. But she was just beautiful and her eyes were open. She looked at me and I looked at her and I just remember giving her a big kiss and saying, I love you. And it was beautiful. And
that is so beautiful.
When they say that whole thing about how you like forget everything as soon as it's so true. Yeah. It's so true. And meanwhile, they're doing all the stuff they got to do down there and you're just holding your baby and
right. So they did do skin to skin, it sounds like.
Yes.
And yep. And did they do delayed cord clamping?
Do
you remember?
Delayed cord clamping. My husband was not interested in cutting the cord.
Okay.
So but he was responsible for making sure that they did cut it and do the delayed. And then, so while they were...
Did you have to get any stitches or anything?
No, so kind of interesting. I didn't tear. I had some inner vaginal tears, I believe, what they called it. So I didn't tear like the perineum or anything.
Right.
And just to back up too, one of the things, I think I got this from you, was to request some oils and things like that. So they actually were doing that for me during the pushing. So I think that was helpful. But no, I didn't tear. But part of my placenta actually broke off and stayed inside and they were having trouble getting out. So I actually had to, after my hour with the baby and we did some breastfeeding, they actually had to give the baby to my husband and take me into the OR. I had to go to the OR and have an emergency procedure to remove the
piece of placenta.
Because there was risk of hemorrhage.
Sure.
And I just remember not even really being worried about it because I just felt like I had such good care.
Right.
And to the point where I was in the OR making jokes about okay, when am I going to be able to eat? Because, it's middle of the night, so none of the restaurants were open. And somehow Beyonce was playing in the OR. I don't know if one of the doctors figured that out. And at one point I was like, is this, because I'm looking straight up, I can't see anything. I was like, is this an all female OR team too? So I was just in there cracking everybody up. And it felt like at one point there were 100 doctors in the room. I was like, wow, I must really be going. So I think it was way more serious than what I realized.
Sure.
And again, my husband was left for about an hour and a half with the baby.
Right.
You take your wife to OR. Here's your baby.
Right.
Good luck. We'll see you. And, I kept asking is anybody letting my husband know what's going on? And so finally they, took good care of me. And at the time I didn't realize it, but I was stuffed full of gauze and all kinds of stuff. And
wow.
Had to go to the recovery room and then finally transported to our mother baby unit.
Okay.
So
Okay. Did you lose a lot of blood in the process?
I did lose a lot of blood. But they were able to, contain the hemorrhage, and I did not hemorrhage is what I was told. So but it could have been much worse than what it was.
Sure.
And then, luckily I had already had the epidural, so they didn't have to worry about like an anesthesia situation.
Right.
So we got there and, finally got to get reunited with Isla and my husband. And, we stayed at the hospital another full day. And, as long as everything was like checking out and the vitals were all improving, which they did, they were going to release us. So we went in on a Monday, labored all day Tuesday. Technically she came on Wednesday. So Wednesday, Thursday, I think we didn't check out until Friday morning.
Okay. That's pretty typical.
We could have checked out on Thursday night, but my husband was like, let's just make sure.
Yeah.
And of course, all of her, she hit all of her little benchmarks, and it was whirlwind. And the one thing that I still can't wrap my head around is like how many different like doctors and nurses and like the people that you build like a relationship with, and then all of a sudden it's like a whole new group, And the doctor that actually delivered me, and I wanted to make sure she was the one that released me when I had my ectopic. When I had to go back and get the DNC after the ectopic pregnancy.
That's like full circle.
It was full circle. And I made sure I scheduled my 2-week or 6-week appointment with her. And I made sure that I told her, because I'm sure she sees so many people. And I just wanted her to know that I really appreciated, the care that she gave. And she didn't know she was being kind, but it was really great to, see her as the one that was on call during the time when I finally had my first child.
That's really, and if you want to mention the hospital or any names, you can. I just, I always when it's negative, then I have to be careful. But if it's positive, if you want to mention, you feel free.
Oh yeah. So it's Emory Healthcare, Emory University Hospital Midtown is where I gave. And it's crazy because since then I have met at least 3 women that were there at the same time, the same day. I've met 2 women who have made 18 babies. So that basically means we were there. Isn't that crazy?
That is crazy.
A lot of babies born in that day.
Yes. So a couple things. Do you remember when your water broke? Did they break your water, or did it break on its own at some point?
I believe it broke because it was after the epidural. Okay. And I remember like feeling a sensation. I was like, I think my water just broke.
Gotcha.
So they didn't. I don't think they broke it.
Okay. It broke at some point during the labor.
Yeah, good. Because I didn't even remember that. I don't think I wrote that down in my little milestone notebook. Yeah.
Gotcha. And then how was the postpartum period like for you with breastfeeding, if you breastfed and getting adjusted and all of that stuff?
Yeah. So, again, I do a lot of research on things, but I also kind of research things as needed. So I felt like I did a good amount of research on breastfeeding. Because, I didn't grow up I'm the youngest, so I didn't grow up with babies. And so I never really understood. And even being around like my cousins and, friends that have had babies, I never really paid attention to the breastfeeding side of things. So I was like, hey, if that's something, and I remember people started asking me towards the end of my pregnancy, are you going to breastfeed? And I was like, I guess if that's what people do. Right. So, definitely, started off and tried it, but it just never really like caught on fully with my daughter in the hospital. I can't remember. It was a combination of my milk supply wasn't in and she just wasn't latching. So she started off with some bottles right away, and she was always comfortable with the bottles. So we breastfed successfully for about 3 months. I was pumping. But, at the end of the day, my number one goal was that she was eating and happy. Yeah. And she was fine with bottles. Yeah. I mean, she would always give the breastfeeding a try, but at the end of the day, she would suck up the bottle and she was happy. I was happy. So I never wanted to put myself in a stressful situation or put her in a stressful situation. And even with the pumping, it got to the point where I was pumping for like 2 hours and getting 1 ounce of milk. And I'm like,
this is just,
this is taken away from me. Spending time with my daughter.
Yeah. I always called breastfeeding a labor of love because your whole life revolves around your breast suddenly. Like, when is the next time you can do something because you got to pump or you got to feed? So, I think we all just have to do the best we can.
And I work from home and it was a struggle. I can only imagine those moms that have to get back to work.
Yeah.
So I enjoy it. Again, I felt like we had the best of both worlds.
Sure.
You know, we had that journey together, and I definitely see and understand the bonding. But she also is super healthy and a great eater now. So
and doing great. Yeah.
If you know, if bottle feeding is what you need to do to make sure your baby is happy and healthy, then by all means do it.
Right. And then did you have any issues with postpartum anxiety or depression or anything?
No, not really.
Okay.
You know, again, I just try to surround myself with good people, good information. I really attribute a lot. You know, me and my husband, again, we're older, mature. Not that, you know, younger women aren't mature.
I know what you mean, but yeah, there's something that comes with life experience.
Exactly. And so, I was always, you know, super conscious of it. But another thing that's awesome is that we have both of our moms are here. So, you know, they were always eager and excited to, you know, if I needed 20 minutes just to go take a bath, take a shower, you know, I could do that. If anything, I remember the first 3 weeks or so, like there always would be somebody here other than my husband and it'd be like, okay, who wants to turn with the baby? Like she just got passed around.
Sure. Loved on like, all of it.
It's just, yes. And it shows today because now she loves all of her village.
Yeah, that is amazing.
So I feel like I was very well supported. And again, even my physical recovery, you know, was pretty good. I made it a point, and I think I mentioned in the beginning, I'm a runner also. So and obviously I didn't do any physical activity for the first like 2 or 3 weeks and just kind of ease my way back into society. Of course, her being a spring baby, it was nice because weather wasn't terrible. Right. So when we wanted to go out for like a little walk, we could do that or go sit on the porch. So I think that really helps to be able to, you know, kind of combat some of those potentials.
Absolutely. So then as we wrap up, what would be like your favorite piece of advice that you would give to folks who are expecting a baby?
Oh, wow. I would say just like I mentioned, the doctors asking like, how do you best take in information? You know, if you're a type of person that needs a lot of information in order to make decisions, then, you know, seek out the information. But some aspects I just wanted to experience and have my own interpretation of it.
Yep.
But I would say the number one piece of advice is to listen to your podcast.
Oh, you're so sweet.
No, seriously, it was so helpful just to hear different topics and anyone who I find out is pregnant, I recommend the podcast. And then if you need that, I mean, I'm not sure how in-person birthing classes are now. We didn't have the option. So an online platform was perfect for us at the time. But, you know, I think it was great to be able to take that course and be informed from like literally every aspect and just be informed. So take the information in the way that you need to take it in and then be excited about your experience because everyone's experience is unique. There's no one can tell you what your birth and pregnancy is going to be like.
100%. Well, thank you so much for agreeing to come on. I so enjoyed talking to you. You have lovely energy. And although, you know, you were quote unquote geriatric, you don't look it. Your black does not crack. So
thank you. Thank you so much. And I just want to thank you again for just being a resource for women all over. I mean, it must be pretty awesome to be like thousands of women's doctor without having to, because I mean, I literally felt like I brought you into the delivery room. It's like, what would Dr. Nicole say about it?
It is one of the greatest, thank you. It is one of the greatest privileges, joys, and honors of my life to be able to be of service to so many people. It is the heart. So I just, you know, everyone tells me, you know, I appreciate folks and like you telling me that you found it helpful, but I can't overstate like how much it brings me joy and fills me up and makes me feel good. So thank you.
Yes. And even just like listening to your personal birth stories, like, gosh, like if there was a person that can testify that you can't predict anything, I mean, so yeah. And you know, off the record, if you want to include this, feel free, you know, if you ever need any help with, you know, just getting the word out about your platforms, you know, please utilize my platform because I have a pretty decent social media reach, and you know, I'll definitely pump this episode up when it comes out.
Awesome.
So anything I can do to help.
Well, let's talk. Where are you on social media? If people want to connect with you, I don't know if you talk about running and things like that.
Well, my social media account is Running Nerds, and if you go back you'll see all these photos of me running and running adventures. And then promptly around May 2021, it changes into a baby page.
Right.
I tried to revamp the running again early last year, but it just morphed back into a baby page.
Gotcha.
And I get way more likes when I post pictures of Isla than I do when I post my running adventures.
Sure. Yeah.
But feel free to follow me at Running Nerds. And if you are in the Atlanta area and you're looking for some running events, you can follow Run Social Atlanta and our big event, the race _UC. So love to see some folks there. And it definitely has taken on a new, my business mind has taken on a new frame since becoming a mom. So shout out to all the entrepreneur moms, shout out to all the working moms, working home moms, all of you.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you coming on.
Yes. Have a great rest of the day and keep doing the good work.
All right. Wasn't that a great episode? I really enjoyed chatting with Tess. As I said, she has lovely energy, so joyful. I love how she put a positive spin on the things that happened during her journey to give birth to Isla Rose. Now, you know, after every episode, when I have a guest on, or maybe you don't know because you're new to the podcast, but whether you know or not, after every episode, when I have a guest on, I do something called Dr. Nicole's Notes, where I talk about my top takeaways from the conversation. And here are my top takeaways from the conversation with Tess. So number one, I think it's fantastic that Tess got pregnant over the age of 40 without any assistance. But I want you to know that that is not very common that happens. Our fertility starts to decline as we get older. We are all born with all of the eggs that we are going to have, and they age as we age. And fertility really starts to steeply decline. Well, it definitely starts to decline over age 35 and then steeply decline over age 40. So if you're not pregnant after 6 months over 35, you should see a specialist. And really over 40, you should see a specialist pretty quickly. And sometimes people think that seeing a specialist means that you're automatically going to do IVF, and that's not the case. What seeing a specialist does is just gives you information. It helps you understand what your options are, what your unique circumstances are in terms of fertility. I know we see a lot of like older people and celebrities and things getting pregnant. I can almost certainly tell you they likely have some sort of fertility assistance, or they have donor eggs, or a combination of those. So don't get caught out there and not have, your options, or know your options, at least if you're over 35 and having issues with getting pregnant. Definitely seek out a specialist sooner rather than later. Okay. Number two, it's really important to have some sort of constant support with you during your pregnancy. As Tess mentioned, the nurses will change, like shift change will happen, different things will change. You'll have a different nurse. And so really having some sort of constant support is really important. For Tess, it was her partner, and she said he was great at supporting her, but maybe it's a doula. A doula is also a great option to have that sort of constant support, because the people around you, the nurses, the doctors will change, and having that sort of constant support will help you feel grounded and more at peace and settled during your labor and your birth process. Okay, a couple more quick things. Epidurals will take time. Tess mentioned how she had to wait a little bit for her epidural to come. Epidurals are considered an elective procedure, and the anesthesiologist may be doing other things in the hospital. It may take some time. Even if the anesthesiologist can come right away, you have to get IV fluids beforehand. It just takes some time to set up. So everyone needs to know some techniques for managing pain other than an epidural. Check out episode 129 of my podcast, where you can learn about all of your options for pain management. You can grab that at drnicolerankins.com/episode 129. So do check that out, because everybody needs to know some techniques for managing pain, because epidurals can take time. And then the last thing I will say is Tess mentioned how it was important, or how it felt good when she looked up in the room and she saw that there was an all-Black team there supporting her. That really can make a difference. I think sometimes, especially in this day and age, people get antsy or uncomfortable, or think we overemphasize or talk about race too much. But the reality is that Black women are 3 to 4 times as likely to die in childbirth as white women, and education doesn't protect us. highly educated Black woman like myself, who has, a gazillion degrees, has about the same risk as a white woman with less than a high school education. And we found that that is because people are treated differently in our healthcare system based on race. Okay. So it's not like from being overweight or having other healthcare problems. People are treated differently based on race. And we also know that those differences in treatment are not as significant, even go away when you are treated by someone who looks like you, by another Black physician. So when we talk about those things, it's not because we're trying to, obsess or make up problems where they don't exist. I would love to live in a world where people were not treated differently based on their race, but that's not the reality of where we are. So those things are important and those things matter. And you should do your part in your own community to help people who are from marginalized groups to have a better birth experience, whether that's something as simple as just speaking up about the issues and the truth that exist. All right. So there you have it. Do me a solid. Share the podcast with a friend. Sharing is caring. Helps me to reach and serve more pregnant folks, and helps me to do more of the heart, soul, and passion of my work, which is, again, serving pregnant people and helping them have that beautiful birth experience that they deserve. Also, subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening to me right now, and leave a review at iTunes or Apple Podcast, or shoot me a DM on Instagram. I'm on Instagram at Dr. Nicole Rankins. I love it when people send me messages about how they listen to the podcast or how the podcast has helped them. As I said in the episode, yes, I know that I help a lot of people, but it just brings me so much joy and fills me up to hear those comments and to know that what I'm doing makes a difference. So shoot me a message on Instagram at Dr. Nicole Rankins if you find this podcast helpful. And remember, it's not too late. If you're listening to this on Tuesday, January 17th, go ahead and sign up for my class, Make a Birth Plan the Right Way. You can check it out at drnicolerankins.com/register. Only doing this class 4 times a year, so hop on it now if you are interested. So that's it for this episode. Do come on back next week, and remember that you deserve a beautiful pregnancy and birth.